number of that?
Containerized.
Containerized. What is containerized?
Something that hasn't been grown, not in a container, it's been moved. Grown in the field and moved to the container.
Grown in the field and then containerized for sale, yeah. Third? Bare root, yeah. Why would you ever want to plant bare root plant?
They're cheap for one thing.
Cheaper? Maybe. Why else?
You can also store them for a little bit longer sometimes, so they have to be done with that from the year, they're not to grow.
And not necessarily longer, but you can store more of them in a smaller space, right? So you don't have these big, massive root balls or containers to deal with. You can just stack them all in a little box, a couple hundred of them, ship them off to a client, right? Less shipping costs. So for distribution, bare root plants are economical that way. But yeah, also for storage. What's the fourth type of nursery crop? Container grown. What does that mean? Always been in a container, not just in a container, because that's containerized, right? If it's in a field first, so container grown. If you see that on the label, that means it's always been in a pot. Okay, it's never seen open soil. Bare root trees are normally planted when dormant. Why? Yeah, it reduces the shock. The roots, because they're bare, they're exposed to the air when you go to plant them. They're not familiar with the soil around them. They haven't been insulated. They can go through a lot of shock if planted during the spring or growing season. Okay, so dormancy is best for those bare root plants. What kind of roots could become a problem because they basically choke out other roots? Girdling. Okay. In propagation, we know that girdling is a process to try to initiate other shoots. But eventually you take that off, right? Out in nature, when the trees are allowed to grow with roots that are girdling one another, they don't let go. They get bigger and bigger and bigger until one of them wins and the rest of the tree loses. And so we have a perfect example right out here in front of the greenhouse. There's an Austrian pine along that walkway to that side door that has girdling roots wrapping around the trunk, and eventually that's going to choke out the whole tree. As for now, the tree's fine, doing okay, but eventually those roots will be weakened and die off. The tree will become structurally unsound and blow over in the wind, especially with the direction the wind blows here and the side of the tree that the roots are girdled on. That tree will eventually fall over into the parking lot, probably on my car. Planting holes should be dug how big when planting a tree? Okay, yeah, 2 to 3 times the size of the root ball of the tree that you're planting. Why would you have to do that? Why does that help the roots? Okay. Yeah, that backfill medium is looser because you dug it up and broke it up already, right? So if you dug just the size of the hole of the root ball, what do you think would happen?
The root's going to shock at first, they're going to try and grow out, it's going to be a lot harder for them, they're not going to establish as well or as quick.
Yeah, they may not penetrate that wall of harder soil that's been maybe compacted, especially with your shovel stabbing in there that kind of glazes the side. The roots have a hard time penetrating that, so if you break it up, those roots will get stronger and be able to eventually make their way out into that harder soil. So what's a PPE again?
Personal protective equipment.
Personal protective equipment. Safety glasses, earplugs, just stuff them in there. So I can't hear you anymore, okay?
Should be able to hear.
One for you. Floater. When we get outside, I want you to be wearing the check. Okay? So we're not all going to be operating a chainsaw at once because we only have one pair.
I did better anyway.
And these won't even fit around my waist. So I obviously haven't been using them. Shame on me.
They do make prescription
I like it. They do. They make prescription ones. Okay. So not only do you need the waistband on, but at least one of the leg straps. Okay. If you don't, then these can sometimes get in the way and caught up in the blade, or they'll hang to the side and you'll still be exposed to the chain. All right.
Well, if you're climbing a tree, it's good to have them strapped onto your leg anyways. You're not going to snag on branches or.
Yep, and that's the same with our clothing, right? That's another personal protective equipment. You always want to have two hands on this chainsaw because the handle is on the back. The smaller chainsaw over there is an arborist saw. The handle is up here on the top, which means you can operate it on small limbs with one hand. That helps when you're up in a tree trying to balance and hold on to one limb and reach over and cut something else. It's easy to do with one hand. This one, I can't hold it up unless you're as strong as an ox. You can't hold that up with one hand. And if you do this, then when the branch falls, it's going to slide down and hit you in the leg. So that's not okay. Always use two hands on it. One right here, one right here. When we start it, keep this hand on and drop start it like that. Okay? Just let the weight of the machine pull it through. You don't have to pull too high. And then this is your brake right here, okay? So that's brake on. You hear it click? Brake's off. If I try to start it right now with the brake off, that blade's going to want to spin when I start to idle it up. Okay, you don't want that to happen because as you jerk it down, you might come in contact with something. So you always want the brake on, okay, when you try to start it. You also want the brake on and the engine completely off when you're doing stuff like this, where perhaps we need to change the blade. When you put a new chain on, you want it to be somewhat loose. You see how it kind of flexes out? But not so loose that those come out of that groove. Okay? Just a little bit of give. That little bit of give allows it not to bind up on you and stop. Do you remember what the danger zone of this bar is? The part that we don't want to cut with?
Tip.
Right here. If I were to draw an angular line from the base of that round piece right there up to here, you don't want to be cutting with that. That means you don't want to be doing this. Okay, if the table were the tree, you don't want to touch the tip on the log and try to cut it off right there. I could do this and cut it right there, or I can do this. But you don't want to touch it with the tip, okay? If you do touch with the tip and you need to make a groove, use the bottom. Because when you use the bottom, the blade's turning this way, okay? So it's going to pull away from me rather than up in my face. If I touch like this and I don't have good control of it, it could round off, and this has a high RPMs, it'll round off and swing up and hit you. Okay, and it has some pretty hard kickback if you let that tip catch on something. So always be aware of that tip. Fuel is a mixture of oil and gas, and you put it right here. Okay, that's how these knobs work. You see me flip it up, turn it in, close it. And then on chainsaws, there's also bar oil. And what that does is keeps this chain lubricated. If it's not lubricated, it'll get really hot and start to damage your gears and
usually you can
the
smell
clutch and brake on the inside. It'll start to burn.
Smell that.
Yeah, you'll smell it for sure. real low. Place. There we go. Okay. Good. Got it. Only took 10 minutes. Okay. So that's the saw itself, and during lab we're going to use it. Okay, even you.
Mr. Munns, how do you adjust the chain?
Adjust the chain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I brought that tool in. It should be adjusted just right because I did it last night. And to adjust this, what you'd want to do is loosen these just a little bit. And then there's a tensioner inside of here. If you turn it to the right, that tightens it up. You see that suck in? Mm-hmm. If you turn it to the left, it loosens it back up a little bit. That's a good tension. And then you would tighten these back up. Okay? Come take a look at where your cut went. You kind of came through the hinge here. If this were a bigger tree with all this weight right here, you would have felt that crack when you were an inch or two away from this hinge, and you would have pulled your saw out and taken off, right? In your retreat zone, 45-degree angle away, you would have been gone. And this probably would have started the tip.
Even with that little weight on it, though, I still want to tip this way. Feel the weight sitting on the blade.
You feel the weight? Yeah, so one thing that we can do is with a tree that's leaning like that, is we can make a plunge cut right here and then put a wedge in. That'll keep the weight off your saw as you go to the other side, cut that off. I would also suggest, you see the angle of your cut here? Yeah. I would have came in at a little higher angle, and that keeps the weight forward as well, okay? but see, this would have broken off just fine, and that would be the direction of the fall. Okay, who's next? Yeah, so before you, so look at your hinge first, okay? You see how this is angled, kind of sideways?
Yeah.
So now this tree's probably going to lean that way a little bit, which in our circumstance wouldn't be too bad of a deal, right? Where it's going to land would be okay, but it's not exactly where you want it.
Okay.
So yeah, it is harder to get that hinge to line up exactly where you think. Justin just made it look easy. and then also just hitting the joint where you wanted it to. See, so right here, the tree might break and then it'll lift on this back side. So you want to be out of the way because of the way this open face is cut. The back side's going to lift when it starts to hinge. It's not a bad thing. You just want to get out of the way when that does happen. Okay. So yeah, this isn't quite.
You just went in and then up, didn't you, Justin?
I made my bottom cut a little bit flatter.
So that's your hinge.
I noticed on the video when he cut it, it's kind of like making an L with your thumb and finger. The top was a little steeper than the bottom.
Huh.
Yeah, the bottom doesn't have to be quite as. It just needs to be more than flat.
That way,
bevel down a little
it kicks
bit.
the tree forward as it hits and connects, and kind of bounces out that way instead of coming. Not as much stuff coming back with you.
So see, that's your hinge. You see how as it rocks forward, it's kind of leaning towards my right here?
Yeah.
That's what would happen with the top of the tree, but even more so because the weight is clear out there, right?
And
a little bit of tip is
turn
like 20 feet in the air.
Yeah, it might turn a little bit here, but the top of your tree is going to be moving a lot.
A lot more, yeah. So right here is just to help show you the direction the actual tree would end up kind of on the camera there. So, good job. Break forward like that. See? Alright. So when you look at the hinge here though, see this cut was kind of like that. So the tree might end up falling a little that way. If you want to try to get your cut a little more horizontal. This top one was really good. The bottom one was a little pitched like this. But otherwise, is that fun?
Yeah. Let's do a real one.
Let's do it.